Welcome to the show. I'm Lolo Ganaike, coming to you from the historic Dakota in New York City, the setting of the classic horror movie Rosemary's Baby. And speaking of 60s horror, our first untold story is from the set of Alfred Hitchcock's classic Psycho. Now, everyone knows Janet Leigh got into some hot water in the shower at the Bates Motel, but you may not know that much of the work for that scene was done by Leigh's body double, Marlee Renfro. But decades later, Renfro is finally being recognized for her contribution to this iconic film. And with her untold story from the scariest shower in history, here's Marlee Renfro.
Hi, I'm Marlee Renfro. I usually tell people that I'm not famous, but I did something famous. I was Janet Leigh's acting body double in the shower scene of Psycho. I got into show business. I started out, I did a lot of pinup modeling. Anyway, working with one of the photographers, Mario Caselli, he said, they're looking for a model or something like that at Universal Studios. So he gave me the name of who to contact, and I was interviewed by Mr. Hitchcock, and I had to disrobe, and then took me into Janet Leigh's, I guess she was in her dressing room or trailer, wherever, and I had to disrobe for her because our bodies were very similar, and I think that's the reason that I got hired for that. Working with Mr. Hitchcock, he knew exactly what he wanted with every shot. Saul Bass did the storyboard, and just about every camera angle was already on paper. But where we definitely had to do a second take is when Tony Perkins has pulled me out of the shower and has wrapped me up in the shower curtain. Well, he reaches down to pick me up, and he gets me up about 6 inches and bang, lets me go because he didn't have his body, set to, because I was dead weight. So that was the second take on that. Then he takes me out and to dump me in the trunk. That was an uncomfortable one because they just had, it was just metal at the bottom of the trunk. They didn't have a blanket or anything like that. So he dumped me in there, and to me it was a bag. Otherwise, I enjoyed working with him.
Good. You're satisfied with your cabin?
About 2 or 3 weeks after I finished Psycho, this is in December of '59, Playboy contacted me, and they flew me to Chicago, where I shot the cover of September 1960. It's when Psycho came out, and my roommate, she says, oh, Psycho's out, let's go see it. And I thought, oh, how boring. I saw a lot of it being filmed. It's really, But she says, come on, let's go. So we did. It scared me half to death. I really was surprised. I mean, really surprised. I just love Psycho. So many people come up to me and they just have to tell me the experiences that they had when they saw the movie. Some wouldn't take a shower for months or even years afterwards. Some, to this day, still lock the door.
I once made a movie. It was intended to cause people to scream and yell, but I was horrified to find that some people took it seriously.
This new movie that I'm in, a little bit, I have some cameo shots. It's called 7852, a full-length documentary, and this is the first time it's ever happened. It's a movie completely based on one scene from another movie, and that scene is the shower scene of the original Psycho, and the impact it has had on our society in every aspect of our society. It's amazing. The film premiered in this year's Sundance Film Festival in January, and I was there for that. And I remember thinking, I have got to watch this several times because there's just so much information. It's amazing. It touches all aspects of our life, even comics and cartoons. It's really amazing.
Thanks, Marlee. You had some very cool things to say about making Psycho. And speaking of things, we're now going to hear from one of the stars of John Carpenter's The Thing. That's right. Actor Keith David recently sat down to tell us his untold story about the 80s cult classic, which remains one of the greatest horror films of all time. Watch as Keith shed some light, or should I say breathe some life, into a popular fan theory. Take a look.
My name is Keith David, and 35 years ago, I did a movie called The Thing. And the most wonderful thing about making that movie is we're still talking about it. I had never done a movie before. I had auditioned for many. My agent at the time, his name was Jeff Hunter, he was like, I'm gonna get you a movie. I'm gonna get you a movie. Roger Mosley was up for the part. And I think because he got Magnum and was then unavailable, I got the job. Whatever reason, who shot John, I got the job. And I was absolutely out of my mind thrilled. But one of the great significances of the movie was the black guy lives.
Mac wants the what? That's what he said, now move! Damn it.
Traditionally, cinematically, you know, usually the black guy gets bumped off, if not in the first act, you know, he certainly doesn't make it to the end. I made it to the end.
You the only one who made it? Not the only one.
By actually being in the last scene with Kurt Russell. This is it. I mean, eventually, when that fire dies down, neither one of us is going to make the night or see the next day.
What do? Why don't we just wait here for a little while?
I felt it was certainly set up to be like a sequel, you know, for the possibility. And who was going to be it or who wasn't it. As I recall, I think we did a version where one of us thought the other one was it. Countless conversations have been started about how much smoke you see coming out of Kurt's mouth and how none is coming out of mine. Now, hitherto now, I've always thought, well, it's probably because I'm closer to the fire than he is. Or the way the wind is shifting, wherever I am in relationship to the fire, there's more of that, you know, heat wave thing coming my way than his. So of course, as cold as it is, you'll see that, but you won't see that same condensation because there's a little heat in front of me. Now, when I watch it again, I wouldn't doubt, I've never asked, I haven't seen John, but the next time I see John, I want to ask him how much of that was put in post, because everything he says, you see some smoke. Of course, now I see it. Conspicuously, there's none coming out of mine. It never dawned on me to think that, but you know. I still don't think it was me necessarily. The ambiguity at the end, like I said at the time, it seemed to me, you know, like set it up for a sequel. You know, a rescue mission comes right in the nick of time to get us and evac us out of there. And I think the idea was at that time it seemed like the thing would go dormant or something, and we would get back, and it was either Mac or Childs who would be functioning well in society until that moment.
Leave it alone, man. It ain't none of my business, ain't none of yours.
Those beings in They Live could be the next generation of the Thing, you know, because they're here and they look like us, but they're not really us. But until you know, you put on the glasses and they get revealed, until they reveal themselves, you don't know. There's something that they say that will give away their agenda. So, beware.
Thanks, Keith. You're welcome to visit my Arctic bunker anytime. We'll be right back with more untold stories from Michael Jackson's Thriller, The Evil Dead, Hocus Pocus, and much, much more. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm at the next stop on our horror tour, the Brooklyn apartment where the 1977 classic The Sentinel was shot. In the film, a model played by Christina Raines moves into this gorgeous 19th century building, only to discover that the top floor has a gateway to hell. Yeah, her real estate agent probably should have mentioned that in the walkthrough. Anywho, with an all-star cast that includes Chris Sarandon, Christopher Walken, and a very young Jeff Goldblum, The Sentinel is a must-see. In the meantime, here's a spooky untold story from one of the stars of the Evil Dead franchise, the great Bruce Campbell. Check it out.
Hi folks, I'm Bruce Campbell, star of the Evil Dead franchise, and I'm going to tell you some untold stories about the greatest hand acting since The Thing in the Addams Family. I think the fact that Ash lost a hand is significant. Star Wars is about the only other time that they really maimed a lead character. Boy, did he get that hand back fast. It was only missing for about 2 scenes. I've been living with that crap for 35 years now.
How does it feel?
Groovy.
Well, it wasn't until about 3 movies later that we realized how difficult Evil Dead was. The first Evil Dead, Ash pretty much survives. He has all his body parts. I was 21. It was my first acting job. I didn't collect my pay because I was one of the producers. We didn't know what a bad acting job was. We didn't know what a lousy location was. We were actually in a weird piece of property, on private property in rural Tennessee. And I get very disturbed to this day. Someone will come and drop a rock on my table at a signing. And I'm like, is that where I think it's from? They start laughing, like, yeah. They're dismantling the sandstone rock fireplace of the original cabin. They're sneaking onto that private property in Tennessee and stealing crap. So don't. You will be shot up the butt. Don't go. There's a time capsule, too, that we left. There's a cigar box full of relics that people have actually been digging holes and looking for. But Sam Raimi came to me, he goes, I'm gonna cut off one of your hands. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I'm gonna cut off one of your hands. Which one do you want? And I was a lefty. So I said, cut off my right. So Evil Dead 2 has a whole sequence of Ash starting off fighting his own hand. So there's a lot of this business. So you're welcome, Jim Carrey. You know, fighting with himself, which is not something you learn at the acting school courses. But the ramifications are, you go, when you really think about it, you really take a time and you go, okay, so how do we portray Ash without a hand? When you try and say that your hand is this much shorter, you either have to like hide it down or lower, and it can't, the end of your hand, if you're saying this is my stump, it can't be wiggling. So you actually have to fasten something that keeps your own hand from, so you have to put your own hand in a horrible restraint. It was this latex glove that we would put on, but then it's still too long, so you have to then tuck it away. It's a whole big Megillah. And we're still fighting that fight to this day on Ash vs. Evil Dead, the show I'm doing now. So Evil Dead 2, I have a fake chainsaw. We made it as light as possible, but it still had to have its own engine in it, so it couldn't be too light. And Sam Raimi wanted smoke coming out of it. The only way to do that was to run tubes down my arm and out my leg, and the only type of smoke that would travel the distance that we needed to from the cooker to coming out was tobacco smoke. So I'm getting secondhand all day long, and then at the end of the day, they pull the tubes out, and I have a tobacco stain that runs down my entire body, which is it's the tar stain. It's the most disgusting thing ever. So thanks for bringing that up. But that became his weapon. That comes with its own fresh hell, because now you go, oh, great. I don't have to wear that stump rig. And now now it's all about chainsaws. Chopping up my evil clone. Maybe someday that'll feel weird. We did improve on that a lot. Ash vs. Evil Dead, we finally went to lightweight materials. We've got a rubber one for fighting. We have an actual 12-volt that I can make the saw revolve myself with my own little trigger. And then we have a full-on lightweight, hollow graphite one. It's the best yet. It's got a little gripper in there, and that one just goes, foomp, you put it on, you're ready to go. Army of Darkness was the first use of a glove that he can then use for things too. Not only gets his hand back, so I could do basic functions, but it's a steel glove that can smash things, and it's got a little hydraulic crap.
Groovy.
But it finally got really perfected in Ash vs. Evil Dead. The character Pablo makes it for Ash as a gift. It's got little tools and lights and stuff on it. It's a pretty cool. We still have yet to fully explore it, but I got my damn hand back. We're very grateful that the fans have accepted it because we could have come back as old geezers and fallen on our face. You know, they could have gone, nobody wants to watch that idiot. So they've been really good about accepting this new version of Ash, an even bigger loser than before. And so we're very grateful for that, certainly. You can watch new episodes of Ash vs. Evil Dead starting February 25th, 2018 at 9 on Stars. Hand to God. See, it's still happening.
Thanks for lending a hand to the Evil Dead, Bruce. As you fans of the Sentinel know, there used to be a plaque that marked the gateway to hell. And now we have mailboxes that mark the gateway to the post office.
The entrance to hell.
Speaking of iconic horror, we recently caught up with Mick Garris. In addition to his impressive horror resume, this filmmaker and screenwriter has the distinction of having worked with two kings, Stephen King and King of Pop himself, Michael Jackson. So dance back to your couches, people, and check out Mick Garris's Untold story.
I'm Mick Garris, and I write and direct films and television. I was the first writer on Hocus Pocus. I created the Masters of Horror TV series and have directed more Stephen King than anybody. I'm really fortunate to have been able to work with and become friends with Michael Jackson. I was a hopeful screenwriter at the time, and John Landis and I became friends. It was right after American Werewolf. Michael had seen that and had been blown away by it. And so he wanted to do something on film like that. Michael was very frightened of horror films, and he was fascinated by the makeup of it. And with Rick Baker and the whole process of transformation, which was something that was always a theme that Michael would return to in his music, in his life, and in the videos. So when Thriller came along, the invitation came out to me and my wife if we would like to be zombies. So we actually got to be zombies in the most phenomenal, successful music video of all time. I'm the last zombie to come out of the ground in the graveyard sequence, and then I'm to Michael's side as he breaks into the house. We come in together, and I'm right behind him there, and that's my golden moments in Thriller. Well, Ghosts came about as an idea that Michael had. He wanted to do something really scary, and so he called Mr. Scary, Stephen King, to talk about an idea to do together. And originally it was just going to be a music video for a song that Michael was writing for the end titles to Addams Family Values. So King and I had just shot The Stand. We were just starting post-production when Michael came to him with this idea, and King wrote the script and then suggested me to Michael. We had this meeting, and that's where Ghosts started. It had a very large transformation over the course of it, and eventually became by far the most expensive music video ever made.
You're strange, and I don't like you.
It really is about being the outsider and about being disregarded by normal life. It was something that Michael could really identify with. And so I decided to let's put that house as it's Castle Frankenstein. You know, the townspeople are storming the castle with their torches and do it in black and white for the opening sequence and do all of that. And what better way to establish the outsider? We shot for 2 weeks and never got into the music video part because when you work Michael hours, they're not the same as regular hours.
Did I scare you?
By the time everything shut down, we'd spent $7 million. It ended up coming in at about $15 million, all of it out of Michael's pocket. And so it became this 35-minute, what do you call it? It's not really a short, it's not a music video, but it's something unique. In the 3 years between the time I worked on it and then Stan Winston took it over, it just, first of all, it became Michael's own project. It was his idea to be the mayor, and it became huge because Michael loved to do things big. He wanted it to be bigger and better than anything had ever been done before. 35 minutes might be a little long for the story he was telling, but it's just filled with kitchen sink ideas. And if there was an imaginative idea or a visual, it's in there. Pretty spectacular stuff at a time when a lot of digital effects were not that sophisticated. They were leading the charge. What people don't know about Michael was that he was really funny. when we were doing Ghosts, I remember at midnight getting a call, hello, being a little annoyed being called at midnight. Mick Garris, please. This is Mick. Gotcha! And it was Michael putting on a voice. Michael didn't remember that I had been in Thriller until I told him, I was one of the zombies, and he got really excited about that. And Michael and I became friends, and to have visited Neverland on several occasions during the course of this was just the most amazing experience you can imagine. My history has been to collaborate with Steven Spielberg, Stephen King, Michael Jackson, Clive Barker, all these, truly amazing people, and I just feel like the luckiest guy on earth,
Thanks, Mick, for that thrilling Untold story, and we'll be right back with more Untold stories from Puppet Master War, Chucky, and more, so stay tuned. Welcome back. In 1984, Peter, Ray, Egon, and Winston moved into an abandoned firehouse, and the world of busting ghosts was never the same. Ghostbusters continues to be a fan favorite, and Ghostbusters' fictional headquarters is now a cinematic landmark. And speaking of classics, we now have a tale from the ultra-creepy franchise, Puppet Master. Director Charles Band was the puppet master behind this beloved franchise, and he sat down to tell us about the horror of directing demon toys. Take a look.
My name is Charles Band, and I'm the, creator of Puppet Master, the series now, even though they're all features. I got started in this crazy business. I grew up on a movie set. I was lucky enough to have a great father who made all sorts of strange movies, spaghetti westerns, and a few horror movies. So anyway, I grew up in that culture, and I love sci-fi fantasy horror films, mainly horror. And then in my early 20s, I found a way to steal enough money to make my first horror film, which was called Mansion of the Doomed. So yeah, it was a great first experience. And many, many, many years later, after I had made movies like Ghoulies and other movies like From Beyond and Reanimator and Troll and all sorts of strange films in the 80s, by 89, I formed a new label, Full Moon, and the first movie was Puppet Master, which came to me in a series of sort of ideas over the years. The idea of why not have a guy who's the master of these sort of evil, but maybe not so evil puppets. And we finally, in late '89, shot the first Puppet Master film, which was released in 1990.
And now a box of little toys.
I think someone's in the room, Frank.
Has become a gang of little terrors.
They were very expensive because it was one frame at a time. You had these models that were not difficult to use, but very laborious. It took forever. I mean, to have 6 or 7 stop motion animation shots in a low budget movie back in the day was very expensive. And those shots, even to this day, even though they may look a little retro to some, are some of the more magical shots in the first Puppet Master. Now, the other technology we use is rod puppetry, which again was more difficult back then because unlike today with CGI where you can eliminate the rods quite easily, we had to usually hide the rods. So a lot of the early Puppet Masters, those scenes were shot on sets that were built 6 feet above ground. So we would hide the rods through furniture and through the floor, but it was so successful, and Paramount at the time wanted so many more that we began to make them every couple of years. As you start working with the same characters, you learn more, even gross things like how best to eject a leech out of Leech Woman's mouth. Leech Woman, as an example, was probably the most gross scene in the film for some, and probably the most well-loved scene because we got a great reaction. So when we were ready to shoot the second Puppet Master, we had this meeting and Paramount said very nicely, look, we love Puppet Master, it's a big success, but you can't have Leech Woman in the next movie because she is just too gross. Because of that, we wanted to invent another character, and we invented Torch, which is far more ambitious to shoot on set because, again, no CGI back then. So when Torch shot a 20-foot shot of flame, that was real flame. So from '89, when we shot the first Puppet Master, to earlier this year when we shot Puppet Master Axis Termination, which was the 11th Puppet Master. We've sort of stuck to our 6-shooter guns, and we have not used any CGI.
What is this joke?
So as far as creepy things that have happened or haunted moments during the making of 27 years of Puppet Master films, it's hard to believe. There have been things that I've heard about, and one thing I kind of witnessed, one of them is in Puppet Master 3. A fellow came up to us who looked, I mean, you know, either this was a gag or this guy was genuinely creepy. And he came up to me and Dave and he pulled out of his pocket a picture of the Bodega Bay Inn on the coast of Southern California. Now, the Bodega Bay Inn, for people who watch Puppet Master, it's a fictitious location. The great David Allen built a model that's the size of a desk, which was gorgeous. That's how you did it back then. Anyway, this old guy pulls out a photo of the building. It was not our angle, and it was on the coast. And he said something to the effect of, "I lived there for years. This is not fictitious. I lived there for years." And he showed us this photo, and it was a freak out because I don't think he had a way to put it together. It was a different angle. It was our Bodega Bay Inn, which doesn't exist. And then he left. I mean, I would have so liked to steal the photo, but he left with the photo. So that was the freakiest thing that happened to me that I saw with my own eyes. So thanks for listening to all this. My name is Charles Band. I'm the Full Moon Guy. You can watch all these movies and more. And like I say, every other day new movies are going up on the Full Moon channel on Amazon. And hopefully, little by little, Amazon all over the world. So that's the plan, at least. And thank you.
We're going from puppets with strings to stringed instruments. We recently caught up with Chuck Varga, aka Sexecutioner from the band Guar, and he graciously took us behind the iron curtain of the beloved metal group and walked us through some of their scary yet highly rockin' props. Take a look.
Greetings! It's I, the Sexecutioner, Crown Prince of Perversity, Intergalactic Warrior, Master of Disaster, and the last thing that you will see in your worthless and soon-to-be-ended life.
I am the Executioner.
Otherwise, I'm known as Chuck Varga, member of Guar, scumdog of the universe. Guar came out of some college art students who mixed together with some musicians, tried to make a movie, read too many comics, got in a lot of trouble, and then we put it all together, and for fun, every month or so, we would do a show at the local venue, and we rather liked that, and we sort of abandoned our movie project, and it became all Guar all the time. We were not taught how to make these costumes. We didn't know anything about molding and casting, and we were very poor. Foam was the core component, and so if you cut foam and you get a hot glue gun, you glue the foam, you paint it, it's kind of something, you know. And so that was the earliest incarnation, I would say, is when hot glue and foam. And for a costume such as the Sexecutioner, there must be at least 20 different molded pieces that you see right here. And I'm a low budget kind of guy. I go with plaster and latex, sometimes silicone. Urethane. Things like that you need to know if you're gonna go into Rubber Monster land.
Genius. The most corrupt being on this planet.
When I think back to that first Guar show, well, I'd say you're rather subdued by today's standards. We used about, a pint of blood instead of 150 gallons, which we use today. The first time that I ever really got to witness bloodying somebody up on stage, it took away a certain sort of psychic virginity for me. I was never the same. And they were never the same. They were like, "Oh, what is this? Hey, you can't do that. Oh, I'm all mad. I'm going to attack you." And they just got bloodier. And it was just a feedback loop that never ended. It started from a glorified squirt gun to a fire extinguisher, and then it became like high pressurized tanks full of fluid. When we're supposed to be picking up chicks out in the audience, we have to clean off our costumes. We towel them off and we spritz them with the solution of bleach and water. Neutralizes the dye, it makes it sanitary, and then we lovingly pack it away in our costume boxes. You do learn to walk around like this, and you're very clumsy. And so when you're on stage and you're interacting with somebody that is bent on taking a punch at you or stealing your axe or something like that, and they've got probably a lot more energy than you do and a lot more dexterity. And so what I would do, one of the routines would be I would take my axe, I'd wave it around, and I'd chop at them, and they grab it, and they go, all right, I've got your axe now. I'm going to go with this thing. And that's when I was like, really? You forgot about my foot. That is the kind of Bugs Bunny choreography that you devise around the psychology of the rock concert, which is pretty crazy. You got a lot of loud music, a lot of lights, everybody's running around. It's really hard for a person to be in the moment and be able to work these things out and not panic. The story of my life is follow your dream, because that's what I did. I did not listen to what anybody told me. I went exactly the opposite direction. So you heard it from me. Keep it weird.
Thanks, Chuck, and we'll be right back with more untold stories from The Evil Dead, Michael Jackson Thriller, Hocus Pocus, and more, so stay tuned.
Let's run the red light!
Welcome back. 1990 saw the release of Ghost, a movie that perfectly combined the supernatural comedy horror and a love story that has ensured that pottery will always be the most romantic art form. Ghost proved that Halloween's not only about screams, it's also about feels. And speaking of feels, we're about to hear about a bona fide family horror classic, Hocus Pocus, a movie many fans feel they can't live without. There must have been some witchcraft happening on set, because years after its release, audiences of all ages are still under this film's spell. And we gathered a handful of the people who made this great movie what it was and asked them to share their untold stories.
Hocus Pocus started as a bedtime story for our two daughters.
So originally it was called Disney's Halloween House.
'Tis time!
And my wife said, you should do something with this.
So we pitched it. We did this big elaborate table set.
Jeffrey Katzenberg was coming into a meeting room, and I had asked if I could get there half an hour before. And then on the table spread across, my wife had bought about 25 pounds of candy corn. They smelled October 31st. They smelled Halloween.
Disney contacted me and asked if I would come in to meet with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and I was invited to direct Newsies.
Kenny had done Newsies for Disney. He and I met, and he's somebody you just fall in love with.
The casting process, there were several auditions.
Of course, I was only 10, so everybody's reading, for me. Basically, just hearing the entire premise and then reading the script, I was like, please, 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 sign me up, get me on board.
There was talk originally for Max of Leonardo Dicaprio being Max, and that was exciting because here was this young, cute kid, and how exciting that was, the idea that maybe this kid that had just done Gilbert Grape would be doing this film. He turned it down.
Who are you? Max, you just moved here.
Going to Salem to research the film was eye-opening.
A lot of the running, initially running through the forest and coming, sliding down the hill and all that was all done in Salem.
Max's house was a real house in Marblehead, Massachusetts, and then we built the interiors on sound stages in Burbank.
They had built in one enormous stage this incredible set.
Kenny Ortega, who was a choreographer turned director, brought this great musicality to it.
I think that for me, as a choreographer, I'm always looking for the rhythm in everything. And whether it's music driven or not, or whether it's a break into song moment or not, I'm always just looking for the rhythm, the timing, and everything.
You know, with Bet and Kathy and Sarah just on wires that looked really thin to me.
And my character has one or two brief moments where she's up on the broom with them. And for that, you know, I felt very special because I was the only one of the other kids that ever got to do some of the flying stunts.
Thora Birch, one of the brightest young children to this day that I've ever worked with. I mean, she was so ahead of the class.
Thora I remember as you know, 10 going on 40. She was just the smartest little girl I'd ever met.
You freed me, Danny. Thank you.
I always wish that Sean had been around because Sean Murray, he played Binks in real boy form.
What I discovered was that cats are impossible to train. You can't train cats. I think we went twice as long in the movie as we were supposed to because of these cats.
Thackeray himself, there are some moments where there are some animatronics, but for the most part, Thackeray is a real cat with some computer work.
My children will take care of you too. And their children after that. And theirs after that.
Now, I've got kids coming up to me now that have seen the movie because their parents who were kids and saw the movie when they were young, they're showing it to their kids now.
I don't think that people back then had the confidence that it would find an audience and have the legacy that it does today.
It originally was not that successful, but it grew and morphed, and the audience, you know, built.
Just the other night, I went to the movies. I was walking out of the movie theater. This young college girl yelled at me, "Mr. Ortega," and I turned around and she goes, "Thank you for Hocus Pocus." You know, and I looked at her and I knew she wasn't born, not even close, you know, when the movie came out.
To know that you've been involved with a group of people who created something that has put a significant tattoo on the hearts of a wide number of people is kind of amazing. I know they're working on a script right now for a Hocus Pocus 2.
I think it's endured because it touches something in people about Halloween.
You know, it's not all about the candy. It's not all about, you know, making people up and soaping houses and throwing toilet paper.
I think the legacy of Hocus Pocus, that it is a film trapped in time.
I mean, I still try to understand, as you say, the legacy of this. I still try to understand that because it's thrilling and wonderfully shocking to me.
Now we're going from doll-faced witches to one famous doll. We recently sat down with some of the people behind the creepy and much-loved Chucky franchise to find out what it's like to go up against Halloween's most terrifying toy ever, and they were just as playful as we'd hoped. Check it out.
Don Mancini, writer-director, Cult of Chucky.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Tilly. I play Tiffany in the Chucky franchise. I also play Jennifer Tilly in the Chucky franchise. It's a little confusing, I know, but you'll get used to it.
I'm Fiona Dourif. I play Nika in the Chucky franchise.
What do you think? As a lifelong horror fan, I dreamed of maybe creating something that 30 years later would still be talking about, but I never really thought it would happen, so I feel kind of like I won the lottery.
It's so funny because Don came up with the Chucky concept right out of college. I mean, he was a little wet behind the ears.
I was in college.
Well, he was in college.
I was in college.
Yes.
Don't age me unnecessarily.
I will not, but he's been doing the Chucky movies for 30 years, and he is a horror fan, so he knows what the fans like.
And also that he wrote every single movie, which I think most of the major franchises have been reinvented by different brains, but Chucky has stayed. There's one mind behind all of them. Even though it's been reinvented.
One twisted mind. So he got super meta, and he decided to put me in the movie, and I'm Jennifer Tilly, playing Tiffany in the movie version of Chucky. And then I was like, make me a horrible diva from hell. And he's like, yes, I'll make you say really evil things and be mean to everybody. And then I'm told the first script came back from Universal, and they go, Jennifer is so unlikable. Can you rewrite it and make her really nice? And he's like, well, I'll try, but you know, I'm trying to write the real Jennifer Tilly.
The main thing was that she was so great in Bride that,
yes.
And my favorite part of Bride was the first 30 minutes when she's Tiffany in the flesh before she becomes the doll.
Oh my God, definitely.
So and she's such a great physical comedian. I just thought, like, I want to build a movie around that while I have that opportunity. So. Yes. That's where I just like, she'll play herself, we'll set it in Hollywood, we'll do the Wes Craven's new Nightmare meta thing.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
You know, one of the nice things about having a franchise is that you have a lot of ideas, but certain specific ideas, scenes, set pieces, even characters might not work for the specific movie that you're doing at the time. So all you have to do is just put it in a file and come back to it 10 years later. Two movies down. I mean, which is...
For example, oh, can I interrupt you?
Please, I was hoping you would.
For example, the scene where Tiffany dies in the bathtub, he originally was going to have the babysitter die, where Chucky throws the television into the bathtub. I'm sure I died much more spectacularly than that babysitter ever could, but for one reason or another...
That was Dinah Manoff's death from the first movie.
Right.
Yeah, she ended up going out the window, which was cool in and of itself.
Right.
I think that is the way that Jennifer Tilly should die, in a bubble
It was
bath.
so sexy.
Yes.
It was like, just
it was
legs
insanely
and bubbles.
glamorous, and then the doll is like, oh, it's so beautiful, the bubbles. I loved it. And it was hard because the Chucky doll, the puppeteers used to like practice with the Chucky doll in between scenes. So in that scene, he was walking around. He walks up to me. I'm in the bathtub. I can't get out because I'm naked. And he's doing this, checking the water, and then he's like winking at me. And I got really nervous. I was going, hello, is Chucky plugged in somewhere? Because I thought maybe Art was going to imitate life and Chucky was going to electrocute me by like testing the water. Yeah.
Come to think of it, would have been good publicity.
It would have been, but that's not like, I really don't want the headlines. Jennifer dies in a Chucky movie for real.
Brad Dourif kills Jennifer Tilly.
Yes.
For reals.
For reals, for reals.
There's a lot of stuff that, like, the seeds of which were planted in my original script for the first Chucky that I'm paying off now. We've run the gamut from straightforward horror to horror comedy to farce and back again.
And what does Martha tell you to do when guests drop by for dinner and you haven't had time to shop? You improvise.
It was this really cool thing about me when I was in junior high school and high school, where it was like boys would be like, oh yeah, her dad's Chucky, and it made them want to date me a little bit more, I think. I had this like spooky vibe. But then when I got cast, I was even more afraid. So he's a walking, talking puppet, and his mouth moves, but also they play his voice. And then there's this moment where, you know, Chucky's taunting me, and it is my dad's voice, which is just the most kind of surreal, eerie, uncomfortable, helpful thing about the movie, where it's so unsettling because me and my dad are really close.
Helpful in the sense that it
helps me be
creeped you
afraid
out.
of it, yeah, because I'm not afraid of Chucky.
Chucky's a really versatile character, and we can sort of plug him into any genre. Therefore, I don't know that I would never say never to any of them. I would say probably the unlikeliest is Chucky in space. Some like little kids could give the crew of the space shuttle a Chucky doll.
Yeah.
And go out in space. Just the image of Chucky floating in space. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's also kind of
that could be a short.
Delectable.
That could be an Academy Award nominated
What
short.
everybody's going to get from this interview is Chucky in Space is next.
Chucky in Space.
Chucky in Space is not next.
Cult of Chucky is out now on Blu-ray digital, and it's really good.
Yes.
It's really fun, and it's really good, and we think you'll like it.
Thanks, Fiona, Jennifer, and Dawn. With 6 movies and counting, you've proved this series isn't just child's play. Stay tuned, because we're going behind the corpses with Rob Zombie and getting extraterrestrial with The Walking Dead.
This is for real. Hey, you remember the starfish in Montego Bay? How would I know that if he wasn't here?
Welcome back. We're hitting the 21st century with our Halloween Untold stories, and what better location to be in than the site of the 1990s classic, The Devil's Advocate. With a scenery-chewing performance by Al Pacino and a devilish take on New York City, this movie has endured as a new horror classic, drawing inspiration from Rosemary's Baby and The Devil and Daniel Webster. Now, oftentimes the best horror comes from people who spent their lives as die-hard fans of the genre, and that's certainly the case for Rob Zombie. This singular artist applied a lifelong passion for all things spooky to a highly successful music career. Then he made a transition into filmmaking with the cult classic House of a Thousand Corpses. We caught up with this fright-making maestro to ask about his beloved debut movie, his follow-up, The Devil's Rejects, haunted houses, and much, much more. Take a look.
Well, the way House of a Thousand Corpses came about is very strange. I was working for Universal Studios during their Halloween Horror Nights, and we designed a haunted attraction. And then the following year, we were going to do it again. I thought, oh, I want to do something different. I came up with the title, House of a Thousand Corpses. This was going to be the haunted attraction. And somehow, it became a film. But I didn't have a film in mind. I just had a cool title in mind. But eventually, the second time we did do a haunted house, it was based on House of a Thousand Corpses, and we actually used the actual sets from the movie in the haunted house. So people didn't know it at the time because the movie hadn't come out yet, but the murder ride that was featured in House of a Thousand Corpses was actually the actual set from the film. So people were going through, and they had no idea what any of these characters were, what it was. It was just a generic haunted house. And in fact, we changed the title. It was called The Great American Nightmare, because Universal thought, oh, we can't have a haunted house that's all ages based on a forthcoming horror movie that's R-rated.
Who's your daddy?
There was a movie called House of a Thousand Corpses that then made the haunted attraction from House of a Thousand Corpses get changed to Great American Nightmare, and that's the story.
You can catch Rob Zombie sharing some of his favorite horror films every night on HDNet. All right, now most fans of The Walking Dead know it originated as a monthly comic, but what they don't know is that creator Robert Kirkman once pranked fans with a storyline that was out of this world. Robert swung by recently to talk about a daring departure for the series that never was. Check it out.
Hi, I'm Robert Kirkman, creator of The Walking Dead. It's a comic book series that I started over 15 years ago. Very early on in the series, I started getting letters where people would say, you say you're going to do this book for a really long time, but this idea doesn't seem to have any legs. You know, I don't know how you're going to get this to go past like issue 30 or 40 or whatever. And my response as a joke was, oh, well, you know, we're going to do this book until issue 75, and then I'm going to run out of ideas. And then I'm going to do like an alien invasion and just kind of completely ruin the book. That's when we'll jump the shark and it'll be terrible and everybody will hate it. And so when we got to issue 75, I knew that I'd publicly joked about that, and it was kind of a thing that the fan base knew about, like, oh, 75, that's when the aliens come in, right? Ha ha ha. And so I knew I had to do a gag. And so I got Ryan Ottley, the artist of Invincible, to do like this 10-page story. The story ends, and then there's a letters page, and I actually printed the first page of issue 76, and then you turn that page, and then it goes into this crazy story with space aliens, and it's all in full color, and Rick gets a superhero costume and a metal hand and is fighting aliens, and the governor comes back and has like a giant claw for a hand, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I never said like, oh, this is a gag. And so there are actually people that wrote in that were like, you've ruined the comic. Like, now you've got Rick running around with a metal hand and there's aliens. And it just cracked me up that people thought that it could actually be real. But then 76 came out and it was totally normal and we just ignored it. And so it worked out in the end. But people were freaking out for a while. TV show's been going crazy. We've got our 100th episode coming out in October of this year. And holy crap.
Thanks, Robert. That's our show. Don't forget to grab the Halloween Untold Stories issue of Entertainment Weekly on newsstands now and at EW.com. Happy Halloween!